Our second install for coverages is going to be cloud. And the keyword is that cloud starts with a C. So in Sky, which started with an S, that told the safety that yes, they had past responsibilities, but if we thought it was a rundown situation, the safety could be more aggressive to come down and help on that run, while the corners had to be more or less strictly pass, very, very late support for the run. With cloud, because it starts with a C, we are now allowing the cornerback to be the one who's a little more aggressive. So in cloud, our safeties are going to be more of a pass emphasis, and our corners can be more aggressive if there's, again, a run outsider that can rally late to the ball, if so be. So, a review of why we call Sky and Cloud, or who calls them, is our safeties. If our safety sees that the number one and number two receiver are wide, we're going to call Sky. Again, they're wide because they're trying to create space. If they are tight, meaning the number one and two receivers are tight, our safety on this side is going to call cloud. And what cloud does, or the point of cloud, is that when these two receivers are tight, we are expecting there to be some type of cross route by these receivers. So a review of what receivers can do: they can either go up, they can go back, they can go in, or they can go out. Those are the only possible combinations for receivers to go. So when we see receivers tight on that, we expect some type of switch. So something like this is a classic switch route that we see. We also see our Arkansas series out of this tight look. And why we see this, or why we run cloud, is because these routes are switching. So the number two is becoming the number one receiver, and number one is becoming number two based on alignment. Before that 5 yard barrier, we're switching responsibilities almost immediately. We called this an IO call last year. We called it a switch rule, right? A couple different terms that we use to identify it. Again, we're just anticipating a switch. Now, if they don't switch and if they both go vertical here, we've won because they've taken away their space by alignment. So we're putting ourselves in a situation to help us best. So in cloud, a couple of slight differences. The corner can line up either up tight. You're going to see that here in a second, depending on, again, down and distance, what schemes they like to do out of this cloud look. But by default, we're 5 yards off. We are not inside eye right now. What we're doing is we're going to play straight up on this corner. Reason why is because, again, these route combinations and expecting this receiver to do something like this. If we play you too far to the inside, you're not going to be able to get there in time to help on number two. So the corner is lined up at 6 yards, or excuse me, 5 yards, and straight up. And again, we can play with that down in distance, or how many feet off you are based on down in distance. Everyone else, alignment wise, is the same. Nothing changes. If our cloud safety, however, knows that this receiver, the number one receiver, is really fast, we can play you a little bit deeper. Okay. So based on our base rules, if we go to what the cloud responsibility looks like, and again, this is not one side of the field dependent, we can really run this anywhere that we want. What we see is these responsibilities. So the boundary corner is playing number one before the ball is snapped. But again, he's reading number two. So if number two goes out, so again, out can be this, out can be this, like this. Again, anything that's below that 5 yard barrier and causes that receiver to go out, the corner is going to take the number two receiver. So if the number two goes out, he now has the number two receiver because it's under the 5 yard window. If he goes vertical, so he goes beyond that 5 yard barrier, we're going to let the safety take him. Okay. And if he goes in, anything inside, he isn't worried about the number two receiver at all. So again, the corner is playing based on responsibilities, is playing number two if he does any kind of out route. Again, it could be a lot of different looks, something like this. Anything where he goes outside before the 5 yard, the corner takes him. If the number two receiver goes vertical or goes inside, he just stays on number one. So like Sky in that regard. Safety, you were doing the same thing in that the number two receiver is the more dangerous receiver on this play. So if the number two receiver goes up, you're going to take him. If he goes out, right, this is similar to Sky, we know that someone else is going to take him. So you need to be then looking to the number one receiver, right? So it is crucial in this coverage that if number two goes out and number one goes vertical, you have to be able to get over the top and cap or be on top of his route. That's why we can align you a little deeper if we need to. Will linebacker, you are assisting in these various rules. So what the will linebacker is doing is he is going to be carrying. So if number 2 goes up, he carries or stays with the number 2 receiver. If he goes in, he's going to step with him, but eventually he's going to pass him off to the Mike because a lot of teams will do something like this, right? So if this route comes, the Mike is going to be staying with this receiver until he gets to, again, about this area. Then he's going to deliver him to the Will linebacker. And then we deliver this guy to the Mike. So again, Will, if number 2 goes up, we carry or we stay with them. If he goes out, or excuse me, in, we are going to ride with him, but then ultimately deliver him to the Mike if he continues going across the field that way. If he goes out, okay, if he goes out, it says that you are on hash control. What hash control means is that, again, if he's right here, we're expecting something to be either coming inside like a slant here, or this back may actually go opposite and come this way. So hash control just means that you're going to stay as close to your hash as you can on your side of the field, and you're going to just ride it up. Okay, you're going to slowly gain depth, keeping all the routes in front of you. Again, it's okay if we give up a 3-yard under route completion rather than a 15-yard vertical route. So again, if number 2 goes out, you look to hash control. If he goes in, we ride him till he crosses the Mike and we deliver him. If he goes vertical, we stay with him. Safety, again, if number 2 goes vertical, we take him. If he does anything else, we're snapping our eyes to number 1 because we're expecting a vertical route on it. Stair step is a post control technique we'll talk about. It's just a way that we're going to get you enough depth so you can keep the receiver in front of you, safety, but we're not going to let you be so deep that you outrun a play either. So Mike, again, with that cloud read, you're just being aware that a deliver may be coming to you or a push call, right, coming from either direction. And that's how we run our cloud coverage. So again, if the number 1 and number 2 receivers are tight, we run cloud as a result of it. Lastly, to look at when we see this squat technique, something that's worth mentioning. Here, I'll clear this art for us. Squat. So if it's a situation where we see the receivers tight, right, and we want to call a pass coverage, we would call cloud, but we can do what's called squatting. Squatting means that we are going to play the corner and will deep. And even if there's a quick underneath route like this, we're not going to dive on this underneath route until we know that the football is out. So squat is just a way for us to play more of a conservative cloud. That's all that squat means. The S in squat does mean that our safety can be a little more aggressive now because both these guys are more passive. This is like 3rd and long, right? Or end of game situation. So squat is just cloud, but we're looking at playing back again based on the down and difference or maybe the personnel that we see on the field. Last slides to wrap up this presentation is something called our close stance. So we mentioned that as a cornerback, right, we're no longer playing inside eye. That doesn't mean that we don't necessarily have to play angle every now and again or have that open stance that we talked about in Sky, but cloud incorporates something called a close stance or what some people may call a press stance. So with this, now we're just going to be square. If you're a basketball player, it's like guarding the guy with the ball, right? With the closed stance, our feet are square, our shoulders are square, and we're looking directly at our receiver with no tilt. Shoulders and feet in square, we're in a tuck position. So similar with our hands and knees bent like an open, but instead of having our stances be like this, right, at an angle, we are now going to be flat. When we play this coverage, in the past, people have always played a cover 2 cloud coverage with getting hands on the receiver. We're not actually going to get our hands on the receivers based on our initial alignment and rules here. So what we're looking at is we want to get 1 yard away from the receiver, because if we do that, now the receiver has to show much faster what his intentions are. If it's to go vertical, in, out, stuff like that. This is something that really helps us in cloud because then the safety and the will have a much better idea of what the number one receiver is doing. And then if the number two receiver switches with the number one, like we talked about, now our cornerbacks can play on it much faster. So close stance is something, if we're running regular cloud and it's, third and short, or it's a running down situation, this is a way that we can get our cornerbacks much more into the play as well. Here's the video component again, reviewing sky and cloud if you wish to look at it. Nothing that's required. My video I just gave now talks about it a little more in depth, but if you want that extra piece, that is there for you to find.